Greetings. Nice to have everybody here today. We're going to be talking about what's new in Exchange 2013. Now, obviously, if I said nothing's new, we could end this right here and everybody can pretty much go back to lunch. But actually, there's a lot of things that are new in Exchange 2013. We're going to talk about 10 of the things that I think are the most important changes. I wouldn't say that it's a complete rewrite of Exchange. Why break something that's working and selling? So it's not a complete revamp, but there are some new features and some things that if you're a legacy Exchange admin, you're going to be perhaps surprised at some of the changes that are taking place. Some of it will have you feeling a bit retro. You'll see they've gone back to some of the previous ways of doing things, and some of it will actually have you looking more toward the future with a web-based console for administration. So before we get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is J. Peter Bruzzese. Folks ask me all the time what the J stands for, and really it doesn't stand for anything. It's just a distraction to get you off of the overly ethnic last name there. No, that's just a joke, actually. So I'm not going to tell you what the J stands for. That's my secret. Only those that are really close to me know what the J stands for. So that should be in your questions at the end. But basically, I am a Microsoft MVP for Exchange. I have a lot of different certifications, as you can see here. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I'm a technical author with over a dozen books that have been sold internationally. I'm a technical speaker for conferences like Tech Mentor, Tech Ed, MEC, that's the Microsoft Exchange Conference, Connections, and others. So that's my modest bio, and I call it a modest bio because it's only one page. But guess what? Yep, I have a second page for a bio. How many people could say that they have two slides for their bio? Well, it's important that you understand that Exchange is not just something that I talk about every once in a while. It's pretty much all that I do. It's what I eat, sleep, and drink. And so here you can see that with Exchange, I had an opportunity years back of working with a variety of different companies. I've taught Exchange all around the world. In more recent times, I've had a chance to participate in the TAP program for Exchange. And that's a neat program because it gives you an opportunity to see the code as it's being developed by the Microsoft Exchange team. And with Exchange 2013, that was the case all along. We were able to see it as they were building it. I'm also a journalist for InfoWorld. I write their Enterprise Windows column. And so I wear a lot of different hats. In my spare time, I pretty much, well, let's be honest, I don't have any spare time with all the things I do. So this is pretty much me in a nutshell. So at this point, I'd like to know a little bit more about you. And we're going to throw out a couple of poll questions. First of all, I'd like to know where you're from. And so Christina's going to take care of that. She's going to toss out a poll question at this point. Where is everybody from? And to be honest with you, I can't actually see the poll going out there. So Christine's going to have to help me out and tell me what everybody says. Okay, I see everybody's from everywhere. North America, Europe, Asia, very good. Nobody from Antarctica, I guess. Fair enough. What about, I'm not going to ask for percentages then as far as where everybody's from, but as far as what version of Exchange everybody is using, let's throw that poll question out there as well, and let's see what, for the life of me, I can't see the polls at all. Okay, Christine's helping me out here, telling me the majority looks like Exchange 2010 at about 70%. Oh, that's awesome. Very good. So you must be very excited to hear what's going to be coming on with Exchange 2013. Maybe your biggest question is, should you be migrating to Exchange 2013? And we can answer all of that. Let's get started. Let's actually get into the discussion, go through a bit of history here. The evolution of Exchange, it's been nearly 20 years. Exchange is nearly 20 years old, and it's made some amazing progress over the years. So I don't think it's fair to just jump right into Exchange 2013 without nodding in approval to all of its predecessors over the years. Here we see pre-Exchange 4.0, Microsoft email transport was done internally on Xenix-based 68,000 systems. That was until 1993. Then in April of 1993, the move to Exchange begins internally. They started using the expression eating their own dog food. It's kind of a gross expression if you ask me, but basically it means that they're not going to put something out that they're not going to deploy locally. So they always do that. They always deploy things locally first and grumble through it and fix their own problems before they release it to the world. And then in June of 1996, Exchange Server 4.0 was released to the public. Then in May 1997, Exchange 5.0. And in November of 1997, Exchange 5.5 was released. Now, Exchange 5.5 is where I jumped into the game. It was pretty new and exciting for me then, and it's still new and exciting for me. With new releases, always raising the bar, always making changes. For those of you on Exchange 2010, you know what I mean as far as the high availability changes, database availability groups. You know, it's exciting when there's a change that makes sense and really helps to enhance the product. So Exchange 2013 is no different. There are new features that we'll outline soon enough. But then as we just keep going here, November 2000, Exchange 2000 was released. With 2003 was released. With December of 2006, we saw Exchange 2007 released. That had with it a bunch of new changes in terms of server roles, as opposed to the front-end, back-end servers that we had with 2003. Now we had the 5 different server roles, one of them being an edge transport server role for greater security, greater transport control, a lot of other great features as far as anti-spam and antivirus protection. Not antivirus protection built in, but still having an edge transport to control that. And then with November 2007, Service Pack 1 for Exchange 2007 was released. Some good things there. For one thing, a public folder management console that should have been with the RTM of Exchange 2007, but they gave us a console to work with, and we didn't have to do things through PowerShell anymore for the public folders. And then we also had a new continuous replication high availability option with standby continuous replication. So some good stuff with 2007 SP1. And then Exchange 2007 SP2 was August 2009, additional enhancements made. And then in November 2009, Exchange Server 2010 was released. So again, database availability group enhancements, still using continuous replication for high availability, but not with all of the different flavors of LCR, CCR, and so forth. And then in June of 2010, Exchange 2007 SP3 was released. So just to give you a little bit of a full knowledge of the evolution of Exchange, 20 years, really looking back, it's amazing. And now we look at the present and the future of Exchange. Here we see Exchange 2013 and Microsoft Office 365. We know that Microsoft Office 365 is a combination of Exchange, SharePoint, Link, and then it includes, I guess, an offer of various Office tools too that you get the Professional Plus Office to download. But this is where things are going, a hosted environment, and it makes you think about what the future will be. But there will always be on-premise deployments of Exchange because there are always going to be some situations that require it, large organizations that require complete control, complete security. And so we're going to always be looking at some form of, I say always, but what do I know about the next 20 years? But at least in the near future, we're going to see some solid deployments of Exchange 2013 as well. Now, if you're wondering, well, should I deploy Exchange 2013? Well, you might want to wait and see what the features are first before making that decision. But I can tell you now that you cannot migrate if you're using Exchange 2010. You currently cannot migrate to Exchange 2013. You can start over, but you have to wait for Service Pack 3 for Exchange 2010 before you can perform a migration over to Exchange 2013. And I say migration, it's not the right term actually in the Exchange world. We prefer to use transitioning with coexistence, because if you have a 2010 or a 2007 environment, you're going to have to coexist, whether it's for a minute or for an hour or for a month or for a year, whatever it is, you're going to coexist with Exchange 2013 at the same time. So can you do that? No, you can't coexist with Exchange 2010 and Exchange 2013 because we don't have Service Pack 3 yet. Now the Exchange team is promising that sometime between the first quarter and second quarter of next year. So you're pretty much solid where you are. If you're using Exchange 2010, just stay where you are right now. If you're thinking about what version of Exchange to deploy, then that's really up to you. There are some features that warrant the move to Exchange 2013 if you're doing a fresh, brand new deployment, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But if you're on 2007 or 2010, take the next 6 months and just relax, because for Exchange 2007, you're also going to need a service pack that we don't currently have at this time. It's not a service pack, I'm sorry, it's a roll-up that is not released at this time. So if you're wondering why the Exchange team would release Exchange 2013 without having the service pack or the roll-up already in place, that's an excellent question, and not one that I can answer without giving my personal opinion, which is more along the lines of they were releasing, all the other products were being released, SharePoint, Link, and this kind of got pushed into the mix before it was completely ready. Exchange 2013 is ready, that's not the problem, but without Service Pack 3 and the roll-up, you're kind of stuck as far as migrations. So that might be just what you need at this point. If we look at the various elements of Exchange, we can look and we can see that Exchange has so many different pieces to it. We have on the left-hand side planning and deployment for Exchange, recipient and database management of Exchange, security and certificate administration, clients and mobile device management, and role-based access control permissions. On the right-hand side, going a little bit deeper, going deeper into the world of Exchange, we see messaging policy and compliance, anti-spam and anti-malware, backup and recovery, high availability, unified messaging. So, I mean, there's so much that you can focus on when it comes to Exchange. Honestly, tell you, we're going to discuss the major changes, but really when you look at these 10 different buckets, nothing has changed that should make you nervous. We're still using role-based access control. We still have unified messaging. We still have high availability. So nothing in Exchange 2013 will have you reeling in terms of what you need to learn, especially if you're already working with 2010. This is not a major overhaul of the product. And it's good to note, too, that these are just 10 buckets that were put together for the sake of a slide. That's not to say that this is all of the subject matter on Exchange that exists. There are many subjects that probably fit within these buckets, like virtualization. Part of planning and deployment would be virtualization. Archiving might be part of messaging policy and compliance, that bucket. Auditing, same thing, messaging policy and compliance. We could have other buckets like interactivity with SharePoint and Link, and that might be its own bucket for unified communications, and then we could slide unified messaging into that bucket. So we're not saying that these are the only 10 subjects within Exchange. What we are saying is that if you gain a solid understanding of these 10 subjects and the surrounding information with regard to them, then you'll have a solid understanding of Exchange 2013, or really any flavor of Exchange. So at this point, let's start talking about the 10 new features in Exchange 2013. And we'll do them 5 at a time here. To start with, let's talk about the new Exchange Administration Center. Right? Now, this is the new graphic interface for managing Exchange. If you're using Exchange 2010, then you're comfortable perhaps with using the EMC, the Exchange Management Console. Maybe you've played around a little bit with the ECP, the Exchange Control Panel. Both of these are graphic interfaces. One is web-based, the ECP is web-based, but the other is installed right on your system. And then you have the Exchange Management Shell. Now, with Exchange 2013, the EMC and the ECP are being replaced by the EAC, the Exchange Administration Center. And I'm sorry, but every time I say EAC, I can't help but say, "You're writing it, dude!" Yes, the Finding Nemo line. Look, I have kids, and maybe if you're listening out there and you have kids too, every time you say EAC, that's what's going to come to mind, is Finding Nemo. I don't know why they named it that, but either way, it's still replacing EMC and ECP. And if we just jump over to an Exchange server, because let's not just make this a slide discussion, let's take a look at our Exchange server. Now here you can see we have Server 2012 running. You don't have to install Exchange 2013 on Server 2012. It'll run just fine on Server 2008 R2. However, the prerequisites for Server 2008 R2 are a bit more extensive. Obviously, you have to install more stuff because it's the earlier version of Server. With Server 2012, it's an easier install of Exchange. So personally, I like setting up, if I'm doing this in a lab environment, I like having my server Active Directory be Server 2008 R2, and then for Exchange itself, I go with Server 2012. Easier on the prerequisites. And so if we just jump over to the Exchange Admin Center, There it is. Whoa! If that's the first time you're seeing this, you could see it's a big difference from big difference from the Exchange Control Panel, which was web-based, and a big difference from the Exchange Management Console. So you can see they've tried to make this a little bit better in terms of the left-hand pane showing you the various features. They want it to be easier for you to find what you need. You can see there's tabs up here at the top. You can see on the right, this was the action pane. If you're using an MMC console like the EMC, well, this is not the action pane anymore, but you can perform certain actions. It does provide details here on the right. And then as we go through, you can see if we want to look at our servers, we have servers here. It's lightning fast, folks. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know why it's taking so long. Normally it works a little faster than this. And there you go. Okay, so just give it a minute. It'll catch up. It was probably taking a break. So we've got our servers. We have our databases here. And if you're looking at this and you're saying, wow, this is a lot of white space. Yes, it is. Frankly, I'll be honest with you. I don't work for Microsoft. I can say what I want, within reason, within certain levels of respect. But to be honest with you, I don't like web-based consoles to start with. I understand with SharePoint that it's probably necessary, but so a web-based console for SharePoint, fine. But when it comes to Exchange, I prefer my GUI console to be installed directly. I prefer an MMC console that I can work with. This is a little bit frustrating. And then on top of it, it's that whole Metro interface. I know what you're thinking. If you've read the reports, though, Microsoft doesn't say Metro anymore. They don't say it because they were going to be sued by a German company. I'm not going to be sued by a German company, so I can say Metro. That's the interface here. It wasn't invented by Microsoft. The Metro concept is one that really is meant to be helpful for users. It really was based upon people traveling through countries like Switzerland, where if you don't speak the language, you should still be able to get your work done and maneuver around, get to a bathroom, get to a train station, and so forth. I personally find the Metro concept to be very difficult to work with. These icons don't mean anything to me intuitively. The plus probably does because it means new. But if you put your cursor over these, you can see how it will tell you what the little icon means. If you're thinking, wow, I really would like some more color in this, well, get used to it, folks. This is sort of the way things are going. That whole Metro look is to give you less color. If you've seen Office 2013, it's the same thing. It's a lot of white space and kind of hurts your eyes after a little bit. So this is the new EAC, and yes, feel free to throw in dude at the end of that anytime you want. So we're looking at this and we're like, okay, how difficult is this? It's not really difficult to work with. You can click around, you can see the various pieces to it. Here's permissions, admin roles, user roles, Outlook web app policies, right? Everything's there. It's easy to get to. Compliance management, in-place e-discovery and hold, auditing, data loss prevention, an error message, retention policies, retention tags, journal rules, all there under compliance management. Organization, here we have sharing, apps, address lists, we have protection, malware filter. We'll talk about that in a moment, but in addition to the various anti-spam settings, there's now malware protection built right in. Mail flow, here's your rules, delivery reports, accepted domains, email address policies, and send and receive connectors. Mobile, here's for mobile device access and mobile device mailbox policies. It'll come up in a minute. Everything's, pretty much looks this way. It's the same. It's just the tabs along the top, and you pick a feature on the left-hand side. Public folders have changed to a degree. We have unified messaging. We're going to talk about the architecture in a moment, but this is your EAC right here. So hopefully that gives you an idea as far as what you're going to be working with. It gets installed when you install Exchange, and you pretty much you log in directly through your browser. The next piece to discuss is the Exchange architecture revisions. So with Exchange 2007 and 2010, they're broken down into 5 server roles, as those of you who are working with it probably already know. So you've got your client access server, your mailbox server, your hub transport server, you've got your unified messaging server, and then you've got on the perimeter your edge transport server. So how does it work with Exchange 2013? Well, The reason why with Exchange 2007 and 2010 there were 5 server roles was mainly to address performance issues like CPU performance, which would suffer if Exchange was running as one monolithic application, especially depending on the amount of traffic going through your Exchange environment. So Microsoft said, let's break these up into roles. The Microsoft Exchange team made the wise move of doing that. However, Microsoft has made progress on the performance side, and hardware has increased in its own performance over the last 5 or 6 years. So Exchange 2013 has just 2 server roles. There's a client access server. Now, for those of you who are legacy Exchange admins and go back to Exchange 2003, well, this will probably feel very comfortable for you because this is very similar to what we had. The client access server role is just like your front-end server, and it handles connections coming in from the outside world, whether it's Outlook Anywhere connections, RPC over HTTP connections coming from the outside, or whether it's connections coming from mobile devices, or Outlook web app connections coming from the outside. So those all go through the client access server role. And then you've got your mailbox server role, which is your back-end server. So the mailbox server role includes all of the typical server components, and it includes unified messaging. So that's built right in. You no longer have to choose. When you go to install server roles, there's only 2 choices: client access server or mailbox server, or you can select both checkboxes and you can install both on the same machine. But unified messaging is automatically installed with the mailbox server role. So you might be thinking, okay, well that's great, but what about my hub transport server? Obviously that's important, isn't it? Well, the hub transport server's kind of been split down the middle without getting into the nitty-gritty aspects of it. Pieces of it were shipped over to the client access server side, which makes sense because information is going to be flowing through that. And the other pieces of it were put into the mailbox server role, so that now there's really no more need for a hub transport server role. Okay, so you might be comfortable with that. There's no more unified messaging, no more hub transport. What about the edge transport server role? Well, there is currently no Exchange 2013 edge transport server. However, if you want to have that protection and handle it in-house, you can deploy Exchange 2010 edge transport. Remember, this is not a server that's connected into your Active Directory. It sits on the perimeter. It doesn't, you can perform your Edge subscriptions. It works just fine. So the Edge, the 2013 Edge, is it planned for the future? Will we see it at some point with Service Pack 1, perhaps? Who knows? Who knows? We don't have any word yet as far as a definite on that, but there's talk of a 2013 Edge transport server. Now, for protection, there's a lot of different things you can do to protect your environment. So don't stress too much about that edge transport server role. The fact is that the architecture revisions, they're very helpful. Even though it's sort of retro, they go back now to a point where we don't have to stress too much about the number of server roles we're going to deploy and everything. In fact, in later years with Exchange 2010, the Microsoft Exchange team has been recommending that you deploy your Exchange servers in a typical deployment. Just deploy the CAS, the hub transport, and the mailbox server all together. Okay, so in addition, we mentioned this already, improvements in policy, compliance, anti-malware. There have been many improvements in this regard. You'll have to play with it to see some of the different changes as far as what they've done. Obviously, the goal with compliance being such a huge factor these days, the goal is to make it so that your organization can ensure that everyone is protected, that all of the legal regulations are being followed, that email is being retained and archived and so forth, that if an individual comes under some kind of scrutiny, legal scrutiny, that you can place that mailbox on hold, that you can ensure that every message can be discovered. So there's a lot there as far as policy compliance and anti-malware being included right in. There's also a new managed store, which you can see here. It's funny, we put a little shopping cart, but really the store has nothing to do with a shopping cart. I just think that's a really cool graphic. Anyway, so the managed store is not a store at all. The store service has been completely rewritten in managed codes. C# it's been rewritten in. Now, although this change bodes well in terms of higher availability and resiliency, it doesn't mean that there's been much of a change to the extensible storage engine. So yes, there's been some work made on it, but it hasn't changed over to SQL. Some have asked for years if we would switch over to SQL with Exchange, and maybe one day they will, but at this point, the latest word on that, Ross Smith IV said in one of his discussions, he said that SQL squeals like a pig as opposed to ESC, which kind of hums along. So I think basically what he's trying to say is that at this point, ESC is better. The extensible storage engine is better for Exchange than SQL would be. Better performance. So we still have ESC as our database engine, but now each database runs in its own dedicated worker process. So a hung process in one database will not cause problems in other databases, right? In addition, Fast Search, which was an add-on to SharePoint 2010, this is also integrated into the managed store for improved search and indexing. Let's jump back over to our Exchange server for a second because I'd like for you to see something here. We jump back over, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the task manager. If we go back to servers in the EAC, and here you can see the databases. You can see we have a couple of different databases. One is not mounted. Now we have two mounted databases, and if we open up Task Manager, you can see we still have the Exchange Management Shell. If you see this Exchange toolbox, it's really just has a minimal amount of tools. It's not even worth talking about really at this point. But if we just type in Task Manager, there you see it comes up under Apps. And if this is the first time you're seeing Server 2012 and you're thinking, oh no, they put the same interface for Windows 8 in Server 2012. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And depending on how you feel about that, which you may not feel too good, then you might not like that. But it is there. So if we look at the various processes here, notice that we have the Exchange Store service. Right there it is. And then we have these two, Exchange Store Worker, Exchange Store Worker. So we have two worker processes. That's because, as we just said, with this change to the managed store, we have now store worker processes for each database that is mounted and up and running. If we mounted that third one in the EAC, you recall there the third one is dismounted. If we mounted it, there would be a third store worker process. And so again, the value here is that if one process crashes, it's not going to take out the other one. And so that's a good thing. So this is all part of a new architecture as far as the revision in architecture. The other point to keep in mind here, though, something that for those of you running Exchange 2010, this might be a bit of a problem for you. But in rewriting the managed store, or rewriting the store and calling it a managed store and doing all of this work, they had to make some cutbacks in terms of what they could support. Now they may change this, but for right now, the number of databases that you can mount on any given Exchange mailbox server is 50. Now if you're using Exchange 2010, the number is 100. So granted, some organizations never see that kind of mounting of databases. They never see over 50 databases mounted on Exchange servers. But other organizations are mounting, up to 100 easily. So it just depends on what your needs are. So what will this mean? Well, obviously, if you have Exchange servers that you're now going to go from 2010 over to 2013, and you have over 50 mounted databases, what you're going to have to think about is how you're going to increase the number of Exchange servers that you have, because you'll need more Exchange servers, and move those databases over in such a way so that you have under 50 per Exchange server. Now, in some organizations, this can be a huge expense to have that many additional Exchange servers needed in order to mount all the databases. So it's simple math, but it is going to affect your budget, and that may affect whether or not you can sell the move to Exchange 2013 to management. So what's the good news? Well, the good news is that they're working on it, and as feedback goes back in, they may raise the number of supported databases mounted on an Exchange server, maybe by Service Pack 1, maybe by Service Pack 2, who knows? I mean, they may not. I'm not privy to that information, but there has been some chatter regarding the possibility that they'll up the number once they get confirmation back that everything's working just fine. So that's the other part of the architecture that's changed, and it's good for you to be able to see how that actually is visible to us in Task Manager. You can see the very They said, we're getting rid of public folders, and you should probably move everything over to SharePoint. But that isn't exactly a misunderstanding, really. It's just that maybe a couple of people talked, they spoke out of turn, especially at conferences and things, and things get said that were not in print and not put in print by the Microsoft Exchange team. They've tried to rectify that over and over again, that depending on your needs, you may want to move away from public folders, but you don't have to. So with Exchange 2013, Microsoft is embracing public folders here. They're modern in that they no longer are managed through the separate public folder management console. You saw that there is a special section in the features pane. You can choose public folders. They're managed via the EAC. So that makes them their public folder mailboxes, which means they use regular mailbox databases. So that's what modernizes them. In turn, it also means that they can be made part of a database availability group for disaster recovery, which is different from the way we would handle public folders in the past with various replicas that would be assigned to different locations. So there's a positive and a negative to modern public folders. The first being that you don't create replicas of them closer to people so that they can access their own public folders nearby. Let's say if you have a global organization, it's not going to work like that. Public folders are still going to be, or public folders now are going to be centrally located, just like a mailbox is located on one server. But for disaster recovery, you can utilize database availability groups. Okay, so those are the first 5 new features. Some good changes in terms of performance. There's a lot of joking as far as the performance because the disk I/O has just been reduced dramatically with Exchange 2013. In fact, the IOPS, the input-output per second, between Exchange 2003 and Exchange 2010, they say there's a 99% reduction between those two products, 2003 to 2013. So that's tremendous in terms of performance. And what does that mean? It means that you can use cheaper disk. You can go with cheaper disk. You don't have to go with these high-performance SANs. You can go with JBOD, just a bunch of disks. You can go with lower revolutions on the disk, and you'll get great performance because they've done so much work with regard to how Exchange handles things with the new managed store, with the new architecture revisions. Performance increases just tremendous from 2003 to 2013. Just night and day in terms of performance. So even though you might be spending some more money in terms of the number of servers based upon the mounted databases, you might be spending less money on your disk. So that's something to consider. Okay, the next set of features to talk about, there's lots of PowerShell commandlets. There's been some changes. Now 13 commandlets have been removed, many having to do with the old public folder management, so there's no point in keeping those. But Exchange 2013 brims with 187 new PowerShell commandlets. And yes, I sat up at night and counted all of them myself. No, just kidding. No, somebody else did that. Somebody else has less of a life than I do, and they counted them, and I was just able to read it off of their blog. So apparently there's 187 new PowerShell commandlets, and that may not be the final tally. As things continue to be worked on here, we'll see more PowerShell. Now, some folks said that when PowerShell was first introduced with the Exchange Management Shell with Exchange 2007, they said, you know what, we're going to rebel against this, we're not going to learn it, and it's going to go away. Microsoft is going to make this go away. Okay, no, that hasn't turned out to be true, and yes, it's still here, and maybe now's a good time to start learning it if you haven't started learning it already. It's not going anywhere. There are still some great things you can do only in PowerShell, and that's just the way it is. I mean, the GUI consoles are built on top of what you can do in PowerShell. So you're always going to be able to do more with PowerShell than what you can do through the GUI. Now granted, 99.9% of everything you need to do can be done through the GUI, and you might be very happy with that. But for that little bit of extra, if you really want to be the Exchange guru of your whole world, well, then you have to learn PowerShell. There's no way around it. Some other changes: data loss prevention transport rule. Transport rules, as you know, you can control pretty much anything and everything. What's great about the data loss prevention is it speaks to compliance for your Exchange environment. It's a new rule, And it's sort of a continuation of mail tips in that it warns users when they may be violating policies meant to protect disclosure of sensitive data. So what kind of sensitive data are we talking about? Well, what about something like credit card numbers or social security numbers, putting that kind of stuff in an email? If you use built-in DLP policies, right, they're typically based on regulatory standards like PCI, and so these policies, you can enforce them. You can make it so that it throws out a mail tip and says, hey, are you sure you want to do this? And they can say, yeah, yeah, I want to do it. Mind your business. And they can send the email anyway. But at least they were warned. However, at the same time, it might also say, no, 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 we appreciate that you think you want to do this, but we are stopping you from doing it. So that's, again, the value of transport rules, and now being mixed in a little bit better with mail tips. Mail tips works actually in Exchange 2013. It worked in Exchange 2010, but not all the time, and sometimes it was quirky. Sometimes it worked for Outlook Web App. A certain rule that you would, a mail tip that you would have would work in 2010 Outlook Web App, but it wouldn't work with your Outlook, and it was kind of funky that way. But with 2013, mail tips are working a whole lot better. Another great enhancement is Outlook Web App enhancements. Let's jump back over to our server here for a second. Let's take a look at Outlook Web App. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to log in as the admin. Yeah, let's see if this works out here. Nope. Let's try that again. All right. So here we are. Messages. Yes, yes, we're having some issues with the Exchange server actually. The issue is not something with modern Exchange setup in a lab environment, is that when you set this up in a lab environment, you're probably behind a dynamic IP address. So you can set up your send connectors, but when you set up a send connector that just goes straight to the internet, it may be rejected. In fact, most cases it's going to be rejected by the receiving Exchange environment. And the reason for that is because, as you can see here, it's being rejected by some kind of spam house filter. So whether you're sending it to a Microsoft email address, let's say with an Office 365, it's going to reject it. If you're sending it to any type of hosted solution, it's going to reject it. And the reason is because trying to send email straight to the internet, it makes you look like you're trying to send spam. So how do you get around something like that? Well, the way to get around something like that is actually back in the EAC, over in the mail flow settings. If you look here we have our send connector, and the way we stopped getting those silly rejection messages is we had to go with a smart host. So if you're setting up Exchange in a lab environment, just consider that. Go with a smart host, because otherwise you're probably not going to get mail through. Mail didn't go through to Yahoo, it didn't go through to Gmail, everything stopped it because it thinks that it's spam because you're behind a dynamic IP address. So it looks like you're setting up this Exchange server just to kind of screw around with people. So here, if we look at the delivery, we see we went with Django. It's a free solution. So if you're setting up Exchange 2013 in a lab and you need a smart host, Django's a good one, and you can set that up. So all right, jumped off topic a little bit there, but we were talking about Outlook Web App, some of the features. I had to explain this though. I couldn't let you see all these rejection messages and think, oh man, what's going on there? This is pretty normal, and we did get this fixed thanks to Django. But as far as the Outlook Web App enhancements, the whole of Outlook Web App is redesigned, as you can see. And one of the awesome features is support for offline access when offline. And then they can have the messages delivered when they connect to the internet again. Now, you might say, great, that must be an Internet Explorer only feature. No, that's not true. OS supports this feature in IE 10, which is what we're using here, Apple's Safari 5, Google's Chrome 16 or later, all of which support the HTML5 local data storage feature. So that's really cool. There's also a new set of UI layouts that users can choose from for their desktop, for their tablet, for their smartphone. So they totally rewrote Outlook web app, and I think it's really cool. I think it's I'm not a big fan of a lot of the other Metro style changes they've made, but if you've ever tried to use Outlook web app on a tablet before, it was a nightmare. Now it's actually something that you can do. I've worked with it off of a Surface PC at the Microsoft Store just the other day. Works great. So some good stuff there. As we already mentioned, built-in anti-malware is now included with Exchange 2013. That's another good feature. Exchange has had anti-spam time. As of Exchange 2007, you could choose whether to turn on anti-spam for the hub transport server role if you didn't want to go with an edge transport server. And for those of you who did that, you know that the only way to do it was through the, yes, you guessed it, Exchange Management Shell. So very good. That's something that we needed to have in place. And then there have been high availability improvements. Now, as far as the high availability improvements themselves, it's not that things have changed dramatically. With Exchange 2007 to 2010, there was somewhat of a dramatic change in that we went from having multiple continuous replication solutions to one solution, database availability groups. You might even say that the change from 2003 to 2007 was a bit more dramatic because we went from having, just simple SAN clusters to now having all of these cool options, even a local continuous replication solution, which they called the poor man SAN. But now we have these database availability groups. So what do we have in Exchange 2013? Database availability groups. So you see, there have been some changes. They've made some tweaks. They've certainly enhanced it, but they have not, reinvented the wheel here. It is still high availability at its finest. One cool thing that they did talk about at MEC, the Microsoft Exchange Conference, is that one of the things we didn't have before with Exchange 2010 is the ability to do a failover if a data center fails, let's say power outage, and we have a data center failure, we lose WAN connectivity, we would have to do a manual switchover in order to get services up and running in our failover site, our passive site, our secondary site, whatever you'd like to call it. Well, in this case now, if you set up high availability with a third site, you can have a failover, an actual data center failover in the event of some type of power outage. So there's the little nuances of things, but that's a big one. Some configuration tweaking in order to make that work, but the high availability improvements are certainly worth noting. So, we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, great. Again, nothing's been reinvented here. We see some performance improvements. We see things like the various enhancements to Outlook web app, anti-malware, transport rules, new PowerShell commandlets, a new managed store, and so forth. If this is really something that is overwhelming you and you're saying, this is awesome, I have to get into Exchange 2013, great. Well then, obviously if you want to do a transition and a coexistence, you're going to have to wait anyway, but it's good that you feel that way. If you're sitting there going, okay, I have a functioning Exchange environment running Exchange 2010. None of what you're saying here, Pete, really drives me toward Exchange 2013. I don't want to spend the money. I don't have a need. I don't want to learn something new. I don't like the EAC. That's okay too. It's okay. It's okay to sit back and say this version is not necessarily what I'm really going to focus on in terms of the future. To be honest with you, if you're running on Exchange 2003 or earlier, there are some who are still even using Exchange 5.5. Yes, you don't have to raise your hand if you are, but even if you did raise your hand, I wouldn't be able to see you. Remember, I can't see you, so you could raise your hand if you want. But keep this in mind. You have to move off of anything earlier than Exchange 2003. What you move to is up to you. So you can move, and there's no migration, by the way, or transition from 2003 to 2013. So you're going to have to do a double hop anyway. So if you're in 2003, you're going to have to go to 2007 or 2010 first. So you might as well go to 2010, and if you're not super wowed by 2013, just sit, just wait. And you'll be able to pick up the next flavor, Exchange 2016 or 15 or whatever it is. I don't know. They don't tell me the numbers ahead of time. So this is some good stuff. Hopefully some good features for you. We want to. I'm just going to show you some Exchange community information here. You know, the Exchange community it's large, it's supportive. We're like one big family. In fact, everybody in the Exchange community, you know, all 1 million of us, we get together once a month, you know, and we have turkey and eggnog. No, I'm just kidding. You're like, where can I get some of that? No, so, but it is a good community, and the Exchange team is incredible about sharing information. So that's the msexchangeteam.com website. There's also the Microsoft Exchange community, immech.com. Look for Twitter hashtags MSFT Exchange and hashtag immech. TechNet is filled with information. There are lots of Exchange-specific sites and blogs out there to help you to learn anything and everything. So it's personally, I think it's a great community to be a part of. And I think of all the teams, you know, I just love the Exchange team. They are so supportive and constantly giving out more information. So great stuff. Let's take a moment. I see we have 5 or 6 questions going on here. So we want to answer some of these questions for you folks while we are looking here at the various links. You can write this down while I'm answering some of the questions. So let's see. What is the cutoff for companies to consider on-premise versus Office 365? After how many users is it more cost-effective for on-premise? That's a great question. To be honest with you, number of users is not really the biggest factor. You know, Office 365 is not it doesn't give you the control that you need when you get past a certain number of users. You kind of prefer more control when you have thousands of users. But as far as the cost-effective side to it, that really just depends. I personally think Office 365 is the way to go for most situations, unless you require ultimate control, unless you have something very specific that needs to be installed within your environment. The other thing to consider is that you don't necessarily need to just go one or the other. You can go with a hybrid deployment where you have some mailboxes on-premise and you have some out in the cloud with Office 365. The next question. So we can deploy Exchange 2013 in production for companies who want to start fresh with messaging. The answer to that is yes. You can start fresh. As far as migrating, okay, so you heard me say a moment ago that there is no way to migrate from 2003 over to 2013. You have to do a double jump. Go to 2010 and then to 2013. Or you could wait a little bit because companies like Quest, they're coming out with migration tools, and so Quest is somewhat expensive at times, but their tools are, you know, in my opinion, the best on the market as far as migrations. So, you know, you might consider Quest. There are certainly other ways to migrate depending on the size of your organization. You can go to PST and then import it from there. You know, if you only have 20, 30, 40 users, then you have enough bandwidth to handle that. You can do that in a weekend. Drop everybody over to a PST and bring them all up into Exchange 2013 if you'd like. The next question, how does licensing work if using Exchange 2010? You know, to be honest with you, I am not a licensing expert, so I'm not really sure about licensing with Edge Transport 2010 and Exchange 2013 deployments. You'll have to ask your Microsoft representatives. What about email archiving? Has there been any improvements in this? There have been tweaks. There haven't been massive improvements in archiving as far as what Microsoft can do. One of the frustrations, you know, with all of the different solutions is that you have to really be an expert in order to achieve full compliance. And that's why a lot of folks go to third parties, because they say, look, I just need a way to make sure I'm completely compliant. So you might go to, you know, a Mimecast or one of these others that will offer a unified solution for everything. So yes, there have been enhancements to archiving, but nothing blowing me out of the water. Let's see. Is Exchange 2013 going to allow ActiveSync users to see shared calendars from their Android phones like Google does? Good question. I do not know. I would have to research that. Are they going to get rid of forefront protection for Exchange in 2013? Yes. So here's the deal with forefront protection. So most of forefront has already been, you know, they've already kind of axed forefront products like TMG, right? TMG is axed. You can purchase it, I think, for the next couple of weeks, but I think after December you can't get the TMG threat way. What is the acronym? Threat Management Gateway, right? TMG. So here's the thing. Does it work with Exchange 2013? It does. And Microsoft says if you have Forefront TMG 2010, Microsoft says it will support it through, I think, 2020. So I think the major support ends in 2016, and then it'll end complete support in 2020. So you've got quite a bit of time. In fact, in my InfoWorld columns this week, my question is, with most forefront tools now dead, what's an Exchange admin to do? That's my column this week on InfoWorld. So here, you know what? We've got a server. Let me just, we'll bounce this up here. All right, so we have, if you go to infoworld.com, there you go. See, it does load. You go under blogs, Bruzzese Enterprise Windows. Hey, that's me. With most forefront tools now dead, what's an Exchange admin to do? And you can see just the whole discussion on what to do. It does work with 2010. Microsoft is supporting it. Here it says support current tools until 2016 for mainstream support. Extended support until 2020. But if you read this article, it's a good one because it will help you to appreciate why Forefront is being discontinued in the first place. And really, it comes down to the fact that there are other better solutions out there, hardware-based solutions that you might want to look into. So give this some thought, read this over. You can also see that some of the other things I've written about, like last week I wrote about how you can't migrate to Exchange 2013. And again, I talk about the Service Pack 3 for Exchange 2010 and the roll-up for Exchange 2007. So some good stuff that you can read there in the InfoWorld columns that I write. Let's go back to the questions, and I'm going to go back to the slides too. And let's see here. Backing up Exchange, how easy is it to do that, and does it handle transaction log issues any better? Not a lot of changes to the backup of Exchange. It's the same. It's the built-in backup solution with the server. Typically, Microsoft has been pushing for years that you go with some kind of alternate solution like System Center Data Protection Manager that'll give you continuous data protection. If you're using virtualization and you're thinking, hey, I can just do snapshots, don't just do snapshots. Exchange doesn't work with snapshots, so that's not a good solution. Really, for backups, I recommend instead of a backup, I recommend that you go with high availability. Make sure that instead, why worry about a backup? Make sure that you have continuous, protection through high availability solutions like a DAG. But if you want to do backups, obviously, some organizations still want to do backups. Then you can use Windows Server Backup, or you can go to a third-party solution. What is the smart host address you used earlier? It was Django. Here, let me jump back over here. Send connector. Here, Django smtp.net relay. So you sign up. It's a free account. I think it's Django.com. Just do a Google search for it, Django, and it will give you the information that you need. This is the smart host. You need a username and password, which they'll email to you in order for your smart host. If you're wondering, does it work? It does work. Once you have this all set up for your smart host, it will send email to them first, and then that will be relayed off. But of course, being that it's free, you're not going to get, you're not going to be able to send thousands of messages through Django. It's really more for testing at this point. You can pay for additional services, but right off the bat, free, you're only going to be able to send, I think, 100 or 200 messages a month. Let's see. Last questions. What if we do not want to use unified messaging in Exchange 2013? Is there any way to reduce those codes on the mailbox server? Great question. Great question. Okay. No, you cannot reduce it. If you don't install, there's no way to uninstall it. It is installed. Unified messaging is installed, but it doesn't do anything, and it doesn't have a performance impact unless you're using it. So you don't want to stress about it. It's a service, but it doesn't do anything unless you're using it. Could you turn the service off? I bet you could. I don't know that it's really. I've asked the unified messaging team about this too. So that's why I said it was a great question, because it's one that I've asked as well. So there's a little bit of lack of modesty. But they said it's really negligible. It's not going to break the bank. Final question: can you run Exchange 2013 and Link 2013 on the same server? And final answer: I have no idea. I don't know anything about Link 2013. I would assume yes, but then again, Link 2013 experts out there, like my buddy Stephen McCasey, he's probably listening in and going, no, don't tell him yes. The answer is no. So I really don't know. that's something we can research and get back to you on. So those are all of our questions for today. That's all the time that we have for today. Let me just um, show you some contact information, some things for you to think about. If you want to learn more about Exchange 2010 or 2013, you can watch one of the training courses from TrainSignal. And we're working on Exchange 2013 administration as we speak. And as you saw, you can on Enterprise Windows at Infoworld.com. You can email me at peter@trainsignal.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at JP Bruzzese. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Christina, and she will close us out for the day.